the Paris Olympic openings, that's been like all the rage. And I just kind of want to put my input, try to be the voice of reason, just in the sense of looking at it objectively. There's two possible ways you could look at that, right? You can look at it as some people said, hey, this isn't the Last Supper. It's actually some portrayal of Dicenius and this and that. Well, the problem with that is that Dicenius is actually compared a lot to Jesus. And for people who don't believe in the real historical person of Jesus, or maybe they do and they think that the Gospels were exaggerated in some way, they say, oh, well, that's just the Middle Eastern depiction of the myth of Dicenius. And they just gave it a different name. And it's the same story, though. It's the same archetypes. And they compare it because they're both born from a virgin, their parents are gods, the water into wine thing, and even the deaths and whatever. They compare and they're like, oh, it's the same story. It's all made up, which, again, very ignorant, because most historians believe that Jesus was a real human being. There's that. So whether or not it was trying to portray Jesus or not doesn't matter, because it ties back to Jesus. And why I say that is because of the halo that the person in the middle had around their head. Halos in old art depict holiness. So if it was a god, a demigod, some kind of holy person, they would have a halo, a circle, a sun, whatever, behind their head to show that. And so no matter what, this points to Jesus and points to the Last Supper. Now, why is it hateful? For anyone who's like, oh, I don't see the big deal and this and that. I think about the outrage that happened in the MCU when, let's call him Fat Thor, depressed Thor is really what they were going for. Depressed Thor and got all fat and then just shed off all that weight, became a superhero and fought against Thanos or whatever the case happens. But people were outraged because why do superheroes need to be super fit and this and that? Even though movies are metaphors and symbols and stuff like that, and it makes sense that when he became energized and he had inspiration to live again, that he would go back to his old self. But regardless of the point, when 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds, they say something just really racist and just nonchalantly says it, those blah, 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 do or say da da da, or they're like this, and you're just cringing. You're like, dude, what? This is 2024. Like, why are you talking like that? But they don't have any malice, right? They just say it because, that's just how they see the world. They see the world in groups, in those categories of physical characteristics. And yes, we've changed and evolved. So for us, it's antiquated, and all this, but they don't mean it in any hateful way. But it's that same thing. It's just ignorance, right? There's no malice. There's no anything, but it's still hurtful regardless. And that's kind of the point. It's like dead naming. It's like a lot of things where I don't mean anything by it, but regardless of my intentions, it still hurts. And so that's what it is. And having basic understanding of what's going on and of religion and this and that, you should understand that they do go at odds, and I can go further, and I probably will. Again, trying to be the voice of reason, not trying to be sensationalistic at all. Just kind of go through and try to break that down. I think it's completely fair for Christians to be offended by what happened. Now, to call it satanic, to call it all these things, yeah, who knows? And honestly, who cares? People bring up that thing of like, oh, like we have to fight the demonic powers and this and that. Our fight is this. It's true, but that's not, again, that fight isn't going to be won in the physical world. And I mean that we're not winning that fight by guns. We're not winning that fight by opinions. We're not winning that fight by arguments. It's not flesh and blood. It's spirit. And so it's prayer, it's fasting, it's transmuting all this ignorance, hatred, anger, whatever it is, into peace and love. So it's absorbing that, and it's not repaying evil by evil, but it's repaying evil by good. And that's a verse in Ephesians, if I'm not mistaken. That's how Christians should look at this, right? Andrew Tate is saying, how long are you going to stand there and basically, take it on the wrong end and this and that? but he just doesn't understand. I know he's a strong, powerful, rich man, but that doesn't mean that he gets it, and that doesn't mean he understands it. And does that mean what some people have called for boycotts and this and that? Does that mean we can't do that? That turning the other cheek means we watch? No. If if you feel the conviction to not watch because of that, go for it. And I think that might even be powerful because if we're all honest and frank, what drives these things is money. So if that agenda does not make money anymore, they're going to eventually throw it away, and it'll be over. And so if the Olympics lose money because of these antics, let's say, quote unquote, then they're going to stop putting people in power that do that. And if they continue to do that, then I think we would understand that it is evil. Now, into the transgender topic, don't mean to be, well, and I don't think it's that hateful. The basic premise of Christianity and what makes it stand out from everything else is the fact that you die to yourself and you die to your identity, you die to all these things, and God becomes foremost and Jesus becomes foremost. And so what happens, why it's at odds at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's at odds because what the LGBTQ ideology says that it's my identity, my gender identity, my sexual identity is foremost, whereas Christianity says that God is foremost and my identity comes from him and not from myself. So now he writes the rules to everything. And if I don't align, it's because I don't align, not that God doesn't align. So when we look at purity and holiness and being set apart, being, let's say, someone who desires to have multiple partners, well, that's not any different than desiring, like, it's just all a malfunction of our desires and how they don't produce the life that God intends for us. In all these desires, they don't in the way that Christians think. So a true Christian sees their own sexual sin and sees that it's the same across the board, right? People struggling with pornography, people desiring to have multiple partners, it's the same as homosexuality or whatever the case may be. And with transgender identity, the idea is that it's as hurtful as being anorexic or hating yourself in any capacity, your physical body, because God gave you that body and God had an intention and a plan for you to be who you are. And so for you to reject that is for you to reject God's workmanship, God's hand in creation. And so that's kind of where it becomes at odds. I know a lot of people are hateful and all of this and that, and they just they don't think about it. I think I've said this before, but like a lot of people just don't rationalize their ideologies all the way through and find the plot holes and this and that because it's convenient. Like they're the way they think is convenient enough for them to live their life without any problems. But if you sit down and ask them, they won't give you answers. And this is, I guess, both sides of the aisle and everything in between. People are just lazy intellectually. You're going to have a lot of hateful Christians and you're going to do this and that, which might have the right main points, but they go about it the wrong way and they just don't fully understand. And again, because it's not well thought out and this and that, it might stem from homophobia or transphobia or whatever the case is. And so I'm not necessarily excusing it. Again, what I try to do is I try to understand everyone and give the benefit of the doubt to everyone. And I think this comes with more level-headedness that maybe isn't appreciated. But the main idea is that LGBTQ, the ideologies and Christianity's ideology, the reason why they come at odds is because of who it serves, right? Christianity serves God and God foremost, and God comes before us, and where the LGBTQ ideology serves themselves, which isn't any different than any other proclivities, right? I think unless you're told and taught differently, that's the inclination, is just to put yourself first. And that's very normal. But in the eyes of God, this is iniquity and this is sin and this is evil. Then that's kind of where the tension is because one celebrates it and one wants to get rid of it. And there is, I think, where it gets very convoluted is where one group will say, well, you have to accept us and agree, or else you're being hateful. And it's not two-sided. I do think that that's kind of messed up in terms of the double standard where I think society just can't allow Christians to be Christians. And I know that Christians are trying to intervene in everyone's business and this and that. And that's just where we're at. And it might be that way until whatever the case is. I don't know. But that's where that tension is. And that's all I'm trying to explain. All I'm trying to explain is the tension between that and why, essentially, why Christians are outraged by all of this. Um, so, yeah, for the nth time, if the depiction of the Last Supper, if its message was self-denial and sacrifice, which is for a Christian the definition of love, self-denial and sacrifice, and I don't, and the self-denial is not even in a low esteem kind of way, but it's having so much esteem that you can neglect yourself out of any equation because essentially if you had an unlimited fountain of resource, then you would be generous, knowing that you would always be satisfied. And so with that, you can deny yourself and deny, like, your needs are met, so you can deny what you want in terms of imposing, which is what I guess Andrew Tate doesn't understand about Christianity is that when you have everything you want and need, all the bickering that happens is like beneath you. But why on a political scale or why in a cultural scale it's important to fight, which I might be contradicting myself now, but it's important to fight because you want that perception. You at least want everyone to have a perception, the right perception of Christianity. And I think at best maybe that's what we are fighting for. At worst, it's just another way of being power hungry and another way for people who want power and all this to take advantage. That's at its worst. But at its best, what we want to do is just like in the same way that like Muslims really try to show like, hey, look, we're not all terrorists, we're not this, we're loving people, we're merciful, we're caring, we're hospitable, and all these things. Christians want to kind of do the same thing, and I hope that's at the best case, that's the fight that we're having with culture is we're not these bigoted people. We just believe that we have a path that transcends life and transcends the norm that satisfies all the craving that society craves. And it's just those PSA announcements. But yeah, I think depicting Jesus in a drag show, it doesn't hit those marks. Mm, that's all I got. Yeah. I pray that that's good. I don't know.